about this whole thing, Morty.
Oh, Rick, something's not right.
Yeah, you're not right.
No,
Ever.
No, look, you idiot.
Ever wonder if Rick's portal gun could actually work? Turns out Rick and Morty might be onto something big. I talked to some real quantum physicists, and they're doing experiments that sound straight out of the show. In this video, we're gonna break down the mind-bending science behind Rick's multiverse. We'll explore quantum superposition, parallel universes, and why your high school physics teacher might have been holding out on you. From portal guns to interdimensional travel, we'll see how cartoon sci-fi meets real quantum weirdness. Get ready to have your brain melted faster than Mr. Meeseeks completing a task. Alright, let's talk about Rick's portal gun. You know that green glowy thing he uses to escape sticky situations or grab some space tacos? Well, it's more than just cartoon magic. In the show, Rick's portal gun is his ultimate tool. He points it, shoots, and bam, instant doorway to another dimension. It's like having a universal remote for reality itself. Now here's where things get interesting. In the world of physics, there's this thing called wormholes. Imagine you have a big rubber sheet stretched out. If you could poke a hole through it and connect two distant points, that's kind of what a wormhole does, but with space and time. It's a theoretical shortcut through the universe. Of course, we're not about to see Rick and Morty cosplayers zapping between dimensions at Comic-Con. The portal gun is still firmly in the realm of sci-fi, but the idea behind it, it's got some actual scientific backing. Scientists have been exploring this wormhole concept for years. They're trying to figure out if we could use them for travel, similar to how Rick does. The math checks out, at least on paper. The problem is, nobody's actually seen one yet, let alone made one. Some researchers are actually trying to create tiny wormholes in labs. They're using things like quantum entanglement to simulate wormhole-like effects. It's mind-bending stuff. We're still a long way from anything close to Rick's portal gun, though. The energy required to make a wormhole big enough for a person would be astronomical. We're talking about the kind of energy you'd find in a star. And then there's the whole problem of keeping the wormhole open and stable. In theory, wormholes could collapse in on themselves faster than you can say wubba looba dub dub. Not exactly ideal when you're halfway through, but here's the cool part. Some real-life scientists aren't laughing this off as just another wacky cartoon gizmo. They're actually saying, hey, wait a minute, this isn't totally bonkers. The fact that we're even talking about this stuff seriously is pretty wild. It means that Rick's portal gun, as crazy as it seems, isn't complete science fiction. It's more like science fiction with a footnote that says, but maybe? So while we can't hop between dimensions just yet, the basic idea behind Rick's portal gun isn't as far-fetched as you might think. It's like the writers of Rick and Morty took a real scientific concept and cranked it up to 11. Alright, let's dive into some quantum concepts that make Rick's portal gun look like child's play. Remember that episode where we see a bunch of different Mortys running around? It turns out there's some real mind-bending science behind it. In Rick and Morty, we often see multiple versions of characters existing at once, especially with all those alternate Mortys. This idea is similar to a real quantum mechanics concept called superposition. It's the weird idea that a particle can be in multiple states at once until it's observed. I know, it sounds crazy, but it's legit science. Now, Rick and Morty takes this concept and cranks it up to 11 with entire people and realities in superposition. It's like they applied quantum weirdness to an entire multiverse. And while we can't actually split reality like Rick does, at least not yet, the show's multiple Mortys aren't totally divorced from real quantum concepts. You know how sometimes you can't decide what to have for dinner because there are too many options? Imagine that, but with infinite versions of yourself making different choices. That's kind of what's happening with all those Mortys. Real quantum physicists are actually studying how superposition might work on larger scales. Some of them even think it could explain the existence of parallel universes. Sound familiar? It's like the writers of Rick and Morty snuck into a quantum physics conference and turned it into a cartoon. But let's be clear, quantum superposition can't exactly explain Rick and Morty's multiple realities. It's more like the show took these mind-bending concepts and ran with them, creating a multiverse that's equal parts hilarious and scientifically intriguing. Think about it this way. In the quantum world, particles can exist in multiple states until they're observed. In Rick and Morty's world, entire realities can exist in multiple states until Rick decides to hop into one. It's like they took the quantum rulebook, tore out the pages about scale limitations, and used them to roll up some interdimensional cigarettes. The next time you're watching Rick and Morty and see a bunch of alternate versions of the characters, you can impress your friends by mentioning quantum superposition. Just don't expect to use it as an excuse for why you're late to work. Your boss probably won't buy that you were stuck in a quantum state. So we've been geeking out over the science in Rick and Morty, but what do the real quantum physicists think about all this? I reached out to some actual scientists to get their take on the show's wild ideas. Their responses were pretty surprising. It turns out a lot of these quantum physicists are huge fans of Rick and Morty. Some are even using the show in their classrooms. For real, Dr. Sophia Chen, a quantum physicist at MIT specializing in parallel universe theory, told me Rick and Morty does a fantastic job of introducing complex concepts in a fun and accessible way. It's a great starting point for discussions about parallel universes and quantum mechanics. That's some serious praise from someone who probably knows more about the multiverse than Rick himself. But don't start thinking Rick's portal gun is based on some top secret government project just yet. These scientists were quick to point out where the show takes some creative liberties. Dr. Chen explained that while the multiverse theory is real in physics, it's not as easy to hop between dimensions as Rick makes it seem. The energy required to create a stable wormhole would be astronomical, she said. We're talking about harnessing the power of entire stars. Dr. James Liu, a Caltech physicist focusing on quantum time theories, had thoughts about the show's time travel episodes. Time travel in Rick and Morty is more fantasy than science, he said. While we have theories about how time might work on a quantum level, the idea of going back in time and changing the past is still firmly in the realm of science fiction. But here's the thing, even with these scientific stretches, the physicists were impressed by how much Rick and Morty gets right. Dr. Liu mentioned, the show's depiction of alternate realities and the consequences of messing with timelines actually aligns with some of our theories about quantum mechanics and causality. These scientists appreciate how Rick and Morty sparks curiosity about complex physics concepts. Dr. Chen told me, I've had students come to me with questions about dimensional travel and quantum superposition because of episodes they've watched. It's a great way to get young people excited about physics. Talking to these experts really opened my eyes. While Rick and Morty isn't exactly a substitute for a physics textbook, it's not total nonsense either. It's like a gateway to quantum physics, minus the risk of accidentally turning yourself into a pickle. Alright, let's talk about one of the wildest concepts in Rick and Morty, the Council of Ricks. This group of alternate Ricks from different realities working together might seem like pure cartoon craziness, but it's actually got some roots in real physics. In the show, we see these Ricks, each with their own quirks and slight differences from our main Rick. It's pretty out there, but here's where it gets interesting. This idea is kind of related to a real theory in quantum mechanics called the many worlds interpretation. Now, I know what you're thinking. Oh great, more science stuff. But stick with me, because this is where it gets cool. This theory suggests that every possible outcome of a quantum event creates a new universe. Yeah, you heard that right. Every time something happens at the quantum level, it might be creating a whole new reality. It's like your life is a giant choose-your-own adventure book, but instead of just imagining the other options, they're all actually happening somewhere. Maybe there's a you who decided to have pizza instead of tacos for dinner last night, and boom, new universe. The show takes this idea to an extreme with the Council of Ricks. They're not just acknowledging that other versions of Rick exist, they're having meetings and stuff. It's like if all those different versions of you decided to form a club. Some physicists argue that if the many worlds interpretation is true, communication between these different worlds might actually be possible. I know, it sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi novel, but these are real scientists talking about this stuff. Dr. Max Tegmark, a physicist at MIT, is one of the big proponents of the many worlds interpretation. He's even written books about it. According to Tegmark, the many worlds interpretation is one of the most popular interpretations of quantum mechanics among physicists and philosophers. Now, we're still a long way from hopping between dimensions or chatting with our alternate selves, but the basic idea behind it, that there could be multiple versions of reality existing at the same time, isn't totally out there. So is the Council of Ricks based on a real quantum mechanics concept? In a way, yeah. It's like an exaggerated cartoon version of the many worlds interpretation. The show takes this mind-bending scientific theory and runs with it, creating a multiverse where Ricks can meet up and argue about whose Morty is the Mortiest Morty. Alright, Alright, let's talk about one of the wildest inventions in Rick and Morty, the microverse battery. You remember that episode, right? Rick powers his car with a tiny universe. Sounds completely bonkers, but hang on a sec. This idea might not be as out there as you think. So in the show, Rick creates this miniature universe to generate power for his car. The beings inside this universe create their own power, which Rick then harvests. It's like a cosmic hamster wheel, but with entire civilizations doing the running. Pretty messed up when you think about it, but that's Rick for you. Now here's where it gets interesting. This whole universe within a universe concept isn't completely out of left field in terms of real physics. There's this theory called the holographic principle that suggests our universe might be a kind of projection. It's like we're living in a super advanced version of those holographic Pokemon cards, except instead of Charizard, it's, well, everything. Some physicists actually think our 3D universe might be encoded on a 2D surface, like a hologram. This idea has led to some pretty wild theories, including the possibility that our universe could be a simulation run by a more advanced civilization. It's like those Russian nesting dolls, but instead of painted wooden figures, its entire reality stacked inside each other. There are even some scientists working on experiments to test if we're living in a simulated reality. Yeah, you heard that right. They're trying to figure out if our whole existence is just some advanced aliens version of The Sims. Talk about an existential crisis, huh? Now, I'm not saying we can create a universe in a battery. We can barely keep our phone batteries charged for a full day. But the idea of nested realities isn't completely alien to modern physics. It's one of those concepts that sits right on the edge between crazy sci-fi nonsense and wait, could this actually be a thing? So how accurate is Rick's microverse battery compared to our understanding of the universe? Well, it's exaggerated, obviously. Rick and Morty isn't exactly known for its scientific accuracy, but the concept of nested realities? That's not totally out there. It's like the show took a real mind-bending physics concept and cranked it up to 11. Think about it this way, if our universe could be a hologram or a simulation, who's to say we couldn't create our own simulated universes someday? And if we did, would the beings inside that universe know they were in a simulation? Would they create their own simulated universes? It's enough to make your brain hurt, right? Alright, let's dive into something that might blow your mind even more than nested universes. Remember those blue meeseeks from Rick and Morty? Well, there's a real quantum phenomenon that's almost as weird. Before we get to the meeseeks, let's talk about quantum entanglement. It's when two particles are connected in a way where the state of one instantly affects the other, no matter how far apart they are. And I mean instantly. Faster than light. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance because it seemed impossible. Imagine you've got two coins that are entangled. You send one to the moon and keep one on Earth. When you flip the Earth coin and it lands on heads, the moon coin instantly becomes tails. Every single time. Crazy, right? Now back to Rick's Meeseeks box. Press a button and boom! A blue Meeseeks appears, ready to help. Once they're done, they vanish. All the Meeseeks are somehow connected, aware of each other's existence. Sound familiar? Okay, so Meeseeks aren't exactly like entangled particles. They're way more complex and, you know, alive. But the idea of instantly connected entities isn't totally made up. It's got a tiny seed of truth in real quantum weirdness. Scientists are actually looking into using entanglement for some pretty wild stuff. Instant communication, yep, teleportation, you bet. But don't get too excited. We're talking about teleporting information, not people, at least not yet. There are even some out there theories about consciousness being related to quantum entanglement. Some scientists think our brains might be using quantum effects to create consciousness. It's super controversial, but it shows how far people are willing to push these ideas. Could Rick's Meeseeks box be explained by quantum entanglement? Not really. It's still firmly in the realm of cartoon physics, but the core concept of instantly connected entities isn't pure fantasy. There's a kernel of real science in there, even if it's buried under layers of wacky Rick and Morty shenanigans. It's pretty cool when you think about it. The show takes these mind-bending quantum concepts and cranks them up to 11. They're not trying to teach physics, but they're using real scientific ideas as a springboard for some seriously creative storytelling. And who knows, maybe one day we'll have our own version of a Meeseeks box, powered by the weird and wonderful world of quantum physics. We've journeyed through Rick and Morty's wild multiverse, uncovering some surprisingly real science along the way. Next time you watch, keep an eye out for those science nuggets. You might just learn something new. While portal guns are still fantasy, who knows what the future holds? Science keeps pushing boundaries. Maybe one day, Rick's gadgets won't seem so far-fetched. For now, let's embrace our inner Ricks and Mortys. Stay curious, keep exploring, and remember, in infinite realities, anything is possible. So what dimension will you discover next? The multiverse is waiting. Are you ready to get swifty with science?